The UNS Horizon floated silently in the black sea of space, its silver surface shining like a jewel among the stars. Inside, a group of humans hurried to prepare for one of the most important dinners in the history of interstellar diplomacy. For the first time, a member of the proud Thalnari Empire was visiting Earth's flagship to discuss peace and trade. Ambassador. Creel of Thalnari was not impressed. He stood tall and proud in the docking bay as he stepped out of his ship, his shimmering silver-blue scales reflecting the soft light. His eyes, sharp, golden, and distant, looked around with quiet disapproval. Humans stared at him with curiosity. To them he was magnificent, elegant, almost royal. To him they were small, clumsy, and too emotional. Creel adjusted the ceremonial sash across his shoulder and looked at his translator device. "These humans still rely on vocal speech," he said with a slight sneer. "How inefficient." The translator blinked blue and repeated his words in English. Some nearby officers exchanged polite smiles, pretending not to notice the insult. Captain Elena Ruiz, the head of the human delegation, stepped forward. Her uniform was neat, her hair tied back, her expression calm. She bowed slightly. "Welcome aboard the Horizon, Ambassador Creel. It's an honor to have you here." Creel nodded once, his expression unreadable. "Honor," he repeated softly as if testing the word. "We shall see if it is deserved." The corridor lights dimmed slightly as they walked through the ship. Creel's eyes flickered from one glowing console to another. Human technology was basic, functional but unrefined. The Thalnari had long ago moved beyond such manual controls. Their ships responded directly to thought and emotion. Still, Creel could not deny that humans had something strange about them. Despite their limited evolution, they had managed to survive countless wars, build alliances, and reach the stars in just a few centuries. There was something in their faces, hope perhaps, that unsettled him. He dismissed the thought. The dining hall doors slid open with a soft hum. Inside, the long table gleamed under soft golden lights. Human officers and scientists waited, standing respectfully. On the table were rows of dishes, colorful, fragrant, steaming. The air smelled alive. Creel's nostrils flared slightly. He turned to Elena with a questioning look. "This scent, what is it?" Elena smiled. "Dinner." "Dinner?" Creel's eyes narrowed. "You burn your food before consuming it?" The humans laughed softly, but Elena kept her tone kind. "We cook it. Heat releases flavor. It makes the food taste better." "Flavor?" Creel repeated slowly, the word foreign to him. "We consume nutrient crystals. Pure, perfect sustenance. No waste, no flavor." Elena gestured for him to sit. "Then tonight will be a new experience." As they took their seats, Creel's tail swished lightly behind him. His chair adjusted to his weight, but even so he sat stiffly, clearly uncomfortable. Around him, humans chatted, laughed, passed plates, and filled glasses. The sounds were soft but warm, filled with something the Thalnari language had no word for. "Ambassador," Elena said, holding a small bowl. "This is called soup. It's warm, made with vegetables and spices." Creel looked down at the liquid. "You dissolve solid matter in water. And call it a meal?" "Exactly," she said, amused. "Would you like to try it?" Creel tilted his head. "I am not sure our biology is compatible with this." "Don't worry," said Dr. Malik, the ship's medical officer. "We've checked the chemical balance. You can safely try most human foods." The ambassador hesitated. "Most," Malik smiled. "You'll be fine," Creel leaned back. "I will observe instead. The behavior of other species is often informative." Humans began to eat. They lifted spoons, cut pieces of meat, laughed between bites. Creel watched them closely. They weren't just feeding, they were sharing. Every few minutes, someone offered a dish to another, or told a story about when they first tasted something. The atmosphere was full of lightness. Creel couldn't understand it. Eating was a private act for his kind. Efficient, quiet, solitary. There was no need for emotion, no reason for laughter. Yet here it was the opposite. The humans made it into an event. A celebration. One young officer noticed Creel watching. "Sir, would you like to try a small piece?" she asked kindly, offering a thin golden item. "It's called a fry." Creel raised an eyebrow ridge. "A fry?" "Yes, potato cooked in oil, seasoned with salt." "Simple but good." He shook his head slightly. "We do not consume starch or oil. Those are impurities." The officer chuckled. "Then I guess we humans are full of impurities." Creel did not reply. He looked away, but inside his mind a question lingered. Why did this simple act of eating together feel so alive? Hours passed. The meal continued with laughter and stories. Humans spoke of family, of their first time traveling to the stars, of missing the smell of home-cooked meals on Earth. Creel listened silently. Their words stirred something strange inside him, an emotion he couldn't define. He tried to focus on logic. The Thalnari Empire measured progress through precision, not feeling. They had evolved beyond such primitive attachments. And yet, when Elena raised her glass and said, "To peace between our species," everyone lifted their glasses. Even Creel reluctantly mimicked the gesture. "To peace," he repeated softly. The taste of the drink was gentle, sweet, and warm. It surprised him. He had expected something harsh, artificial. Instead, it felt comforting. Elena noticed his reaction and smiled. "Not bad, right?" Creel hesitated. "It is acceptable," she laughed. "Coming from you, I'll take that as high praise." He tilted his head. "You humans often use humor to hide your emotions. And you Thalnari avoid emotions to hide your fear of them," she replied kindly. The words struck deeper than she realized. For the first time in years, Creel had no response. Later that night, after the dinner ended, Creel found himself walking alone through the observation deck. The vastness of space stretched before him, endless stars silent and cold. He thought about the laughter, the stories, the warmth in that room. Humans seemed to gain energy not just from food, but from being together. Their meals weren't only about survival, they were about connection. Could such a thing truly have power? He placed a hand over his chest. His twin hearts beat calmly, but his mind was restless. On the table, the humans had left a small plate behind. A few of those golden sticks, the fries, sat untouched. Creel stared at them. They were simple, humble, almost meaningless. Yet they had been the source of such joy. He slowly reached for one. The scent was faint but pleasant. He lifted it close, studying its texture. Oil, starch, salt, nothing special. And yet something inside him whispered, "Try it." But he stopped himself. "No," he said quietly. "This is beneath me." He placed it back on the plate. Still, he couldn't walk away. He looked at the stars again. What makes them so different? He wondered aloud. Why does their weakness give them strength? No one answered. Only the hum of the ship filled the silence. Meanwhile, in the ship's control room, Captain Elena watched him on the monitor. She smiled softly. "He's curious," she said. Dr. Malik chuckled. "Curious, yes. But too proud to admit it," Elena nodded. "Give him time. Even pride can't silence curiosity forever." Back in the observation deck, Creel stood for a long time. The stars seemed distant, but the laughter from the dining hall still echoed in his ears. For reasons he couldn't explain, that sound stayed with him. He finally turned and walked away. But before leaving, his gaze fell once more on the small golden fry left behind on the plate. He hesitated, then looked away. Tomorrow he would return for the diplomatic talks. He told himself the food didn't matter, that humans were simply sentimental creatures. But deep inside, something small had begun to change. The following morning, Creel woke to the soft hum of the UNS horizon. His room, unlike his ship on Thalnar, was simple, clean, and filled with strange, soft lights that seemed to push away the shadows. But no matter how much the humans tried to make him comfortable, Creel couldn't shake the feeling of alienness. There was something about this place that didn't sit right with him. He dressed quickly, adjusting his ceremonial sash across his broad shoulders. His mind kept drifting back to the previous night, the dinner, the laughter, the food. And more than anything, the strange comfort that seemed to come from eating with others. He had never experienced that before, and it made him feel uneasy. Despite himself, he couldn't stop thinking about those golden sticks, the fries. The thought of them stirred something in his chest, a feeling he couldn't name. It made him angry. What's happening to me? He thought. He was an ambassador of the Thalnari Empire, a race of beings who prided themselves on purity, logic, and efficiency, and yet here he was obsessing over something as ridiculous as a human snack. Still, he knew he had a duty. Today was the day of the official peace talks. He would sit down with the humans, discuss trade and technology, and perhaps secure a stronger alliance. But there was no escaping the feeling that somehow, the food and the emotions it stirred would be part of the equation. As Creel entered the dining hall, He saw that Elena was already sitting at the table, talking to several human officers. There was a relaxed warmth about her that Creel found both puzzling and irritating. She smiled when she saw him approach. "Good morning, Ambassador Creel. I trust you slept well?" Creel gave a short nod but said nothing. His golden eyes flickered to the plates of food set on the table. There were fresh fruits, vegetables, and a large bowl of something thick and brown, steaming gently. The sight made him uneasy, but he forced himself to maintain his composure. Elena noticed his hesitation. "I know it's hard for someone from the Thalnari to understand, but food is more than just nourishment to us. It's a way of connecting." "Connecting," Creel repeated, his voice almost a growl. "You waste time and energy to form bonds over something as trivial as eating." "It's not trivial, Ambassador," Elena said, her voice calm yet firm. "It's essential. Food is the one thing that every human shares, no matter where we're from. It's our way of showing care for one another." Creel frowned. He didn't understand. The Thalnari had never needed such rituals. In fact, the thought of wasting time to sit down and eat together felt primitive. The Thalnari consumed their sustenance in an instant, efficiently absorbing everything they needed to survive. The humans were different. They laughed over meals. They bonded over food. And somehow it worked. Elena caught his gaze and smiled. "You don't have to understand it right now, but you will one day. Even a single meal can change everything." Creel shifted uncomfortably. He couldn't shake the idea that this whole thing was nothing more than a distraction. But in the pit of his stomach, a small voice whispered, "What if it's more?" As the day wore on, Creel found himself preoccupied. The peace talks proceeded smoothly, with humans exchanging data about technology and trade agreements. Creel remained distant, his sharp eyes scanning the holographic charts and graphs in front of him, his mind elsewhere. But his thoughts kept drifting back to the evening before, those golden sticks of fried food. He couldn't stop wondering why the taste had stirred something inside him. After the meetings ended, Creel walked alone through the quiet hallways of the UNS Horizon. The ship was still, save for the faint hum of engines deep below. He passed by the dining hall and his steps faltered as he saw the small plate of fries left from the night before. For a moment, Creel stood still, staring at the simple, golden shapes. He could hear the sounds of laughter in his memory, human voices filled with joy, stories shared around the table. His hands clenched into fists. He had no choice. He had to know. With a sigh, Creel walked over and carefully picked up one of the fries. He held it in his hand, inspecting it for a long moment. It was warm and crispy, with a faint smell of salt. He felt foolish standing there like this, but something inside him refused to let go of the curiosity. At last, he took a deep breath and brought the fry to his mouth. The moment it touched his tongue, his entire body seemed to freeze. The salt, the crispy outer layer, the soft, warm inside. It was unlike anything he had ever tasted. It wasn't pure. It wasn't efficient, but somehow it felt right. For the first time, Creel felt something stir deep within him, a warmth, a connection, a sense of belonging. He didn't understand it. He couldn't explain it. But as he chewed slowly, his mind began to race. How could something so simple have such an effect on me? Later that night, as Creel sat in his private quarters, he found himself deep in thought. He had tried to push away the experience, but now it was impossible to ignore. Something about the fries, the warmth, the simplicity, the salt had changed him. He reached for his communication device and activated it. His superior, Commander Kyle, appeared on the screen. "Ambassador Creel, are you ready for tomorrow's meeting?" Creel hesitated before responding. "Commander, do you believe that food can change a species?" Kyle's brow furrowed.
"What do you mean?
I tasted something today. Food from Earth. It was called a fry, and it made me feel something. Something I cannot explain." Kyle paused, his face unreadable. "Ambassador, we do not have time for feelings. Our mission is to secure power, to gain resources." "I know that," Creel said sharply. "But there is something more. The humans. They bond over food. They share it. I have never seen anything like it. It's as though the act of eating together unites them." The commander stared at him for a long moment. "Be careful, Creel. Don't let their weaknesses cloud your judgment. A species that is so emotional is bound to make poor decisions." Creel stood silently, the words lingering in the air. He wasn't sure if he agreed. Something inside him was shifting, and for the first time in his life, he felt like he was beginning to understand the humans in a way he never had before. The next day, Creel found himself at another gathering. The humans had invited him to share in their formal meal. He arrived early, determined to keep his mind focused. But as he entered the room, he noticed that it was much different than before. There was no formality here, no strict table manners, no stiff speeches. Instead, the humans had gathered in a circle, sitting on cushions on the floor. The food was placed in the center, and everyone was laughing, talking, and sharing. It was a celebration, a moment to come together. Creel hesitated. Could he really do this? Could he join them in this strange, emotional act of sharing? He sat down slowly, feeling out of place. Elena caught his eye and smiled. "You're welcome to join us, Ambassador. Food tastes better when shared." Despite himself, Creel found his gaze drawn to the plates of food. The fries were there, but so were other dishes. Fruits, breads, and steaming pots of vegetables. The smells mixed together in a way that made his stomach twist in a way he hadn't expected. Without thinking, he reached for a small piece of bread. It was warm, soft, and full of flavor. He took a bite. The taste wasn't perfect, but it had something the nutrient crystals never did. It had a feeling, a connection. For the first time, Creel wondered if he had been wrong. Maybe food was more than just sustenance. Maybe it was the key to understanding humans. Elena smiled as she watched him. "You'll see, Ambassador. One meal can change everything." And as Creel looked around at the humans laughing, sharing, and connecting, he began to believe her. The days following Creel's first real meal with humans passed in a blur. At first he had told himself it was nothing more than curiosity, a fleeting moment of weakness. But no matter how hard he tried to dismiss it, the feeling, the sense of connection lingered. He had tasted their food, shared in their laughter, and experienced something he never thought possible. The bond between them, tied together by something as simple as eating. Each morning, when he awoke in his quarters aboard the UNS Horizon, Creel found himself thinking about the human customs, the way they gathered together, the way they shared food, the way they smiled and laughed over the simplest of meals. It was so unlike the Thalnari way. His people consumed their nutrient crystals alone, with no warmth, no joy, just a sterile, efficient need to survive. It worked, of course. It was logical, but it lacked something the humans seemed to possess in abundance. On the third morning after the feast, Creel found himself standing in front of the mess hall again. The door slid open, and the familiar smell of warm food wafted toward him. But this time there was no hesitation, no desire to turn away. He stepped inside, his eyes scanning the table. There were no grand dishes or complex meals, just the simple, comforting food that had made him question his beliefs. Elena Ruiz was already there, sitting with a cup of steaming tea in her hands. She looked up and smiled warmly when she saw him enter. "Good morning, Ambassador. I thought you might come." Creel didn't know how to respond. It was strange, this feeling of expectation. But for the first time, he found himself reaching for a small plate of warm bread that was on the table. He picked it up, inspecting it for a moment before taking a small bite. It was soft, slightly sweet, and the warmth seemed to fill something inside him that had been empty for far too long. "You've never tasted bread before?" Elena asked softly, watching him with a knowing smile. Creel looked at her, surprised. "I've tasted many things, but this is different." Elena nodded as if she had expected that response. Food can be more than just sustenance. It can be a way of feeling, of connecting. Creel chewed thoughtfully. The bread wasn't perfect, but there was something in it, a simple human joy that he had never experienced before. His people never allowed themselves such pleasures. Everything was about survival, about efficiency, about purpose. And yet, this small act of eating together, of sharing food, made him feel something he couldn't explain. For a moment, he allowed himself to think about it. Could this be real? Could this strange feeling be the key to understanding humans? The next few days passed with more shared meals, each one leaving Creel more and more puzzled. He found himself eagerly awaiting the next gathering, the next meal. The food was simple, often the same dishes, fries, bread, vegetables, and strange sweet drinks. Yet each time he felt a new layer of warmth, of connection, of understanding. He had tried to push it away, but now he couldn't. The human's food had unlocked something inside him. One afternoon, as Creel was leaving the conference room after another meeting, Elena caught up to him. She had a small plate in her hands. "Ambassador," she said with a smile, "we have something new for you today." Creel looked down at the plate, which held a small, round object. It was deep-fried, crispy, and golden brown. "What is this?" he asked, skeptical. "We call them donuts," Elena explained. "It's a sweet food meant to be enjoyed with others." Creel raised an eyebrow but took the donut from her hand. "You humans? Eat sweets for nourishment?" Elena laughed softly. "It's not just about nourishment. It's about joy. Donuts are a treat, something that makes us feel good." Creel stared at the donut for a long time. Could something as trivial as this sugary fried object, really make a difference? It was illogical, impractical. Yet something inside him urged him to try it. Slowly he brought the donut to his mouth and took a small bite. The taste was unlike anything he had experienced. It was sweet, soft, and warm. It spread through him in a wave of unexpected comfort. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to focus. "What is this feeling?" "Do you feel it?" Elena's voice broke through his thoughts. "The joy of sharing a moment, the joy of just being together." Creel nodded slowly. He couldn't deny it any longer. This is real. That evening, Creel couldn't sleep. He lay awake in his bed, staring up at the ceiling. The stars outside his window blinked quietly, their distant light casting shadows across the room. His mind raced with thoughts he had never entertained before. He had thought the Thalnari way, their cold, efficient, logical way, was the only way to live. But now he wasn't so sure. He thought of the humans again. The way they had bonded over food. The way they had laughed, shared, and supported one another. Their food wasn't perfect. It wasn't efficient. But it had meaning. It had feeling. And that in itself made it stronger than anything his people had ever known. Creel sat up in his bed, his mind still churning. There was something deeply powerful about the human way of life. They weren't perfect, and yet they found strength in their emotions, in their bonds, in their shared experiences. He had never realized it until now, but food, something as simple as food, was at the core of it. The Thalnari had always prided themselves on being the most advanced species in the galaxy. They had evolved to perfection, to a point where they needed nothing more than sustenance from their nutrient crystals. But the humans, they were different. They didn't need perfection. They thrived on connection, and it was that connection that made them stronger. Creel stood up and walked to the observation window. He stared out into the vast emptiness of space. What is my role in all of this? He wondered. Am I simply here to negotiate, to gain resources? Or is there more? The next day, Creel's mind was clearer than it had been in weeks. As he sat down to breakfast with Elena and the other humans, he no longer felt like an outsider. He had tasted their food, shared in their laughter, and experienced their way of life. And for the first time, he felt part of something bigger. "Ambassador," Elena said, breaking the silence. "You seem different today, more at peace." Creel looked up from his plate, meeting her gaze. He nodded slowly. "I think I understand now." "Elena," he began carefully, his voice softer than usual. "The way you humans live, it's not logical, but it is powerful. Your food, your bonds, it's all connected, isn't it?" Elena smiled warmly. "Yes, Ambassador. Food brings us together. It reminds us that we are not alone, and through that we find strength." Creel thought about that for a moment. He had once believed that strength came from logic, from control, from the ability to live without emotion, but now he understood. True strength comes from connection. Later that day, as Creel sat alone in his quarters, he found himself reaching for the small plate of fries that had been left for him. He picked one up and examined it carefully, almost reverently. He didn't know why he felt this way, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that he had learned something important. The humans had something the Thalnari had never truly understood, the power of connection. And perhaps, in time, the Thalnari would learn to embrace it too. Days passed, and Creel found himself becoming more and more fascinated by the humans' way of life. It wasn't just about food anymore. It was about everything. The way they lived, the way they interacted, the way they valued connections over efficiency. Things he had once dismissed as weaknesses were now beginning to look like strengths. Creel sat at the large table in the UNS Horizons dining hall, his golden eyes scanning the humans who were seated around him. The table was covered with simple, humble food. Vegetables, grains, fruits, and of course a small bowl of fries that Elena had jokingly placed in front of him. He smiled to himself. She knew him too well. The human crew members were talking amongst themselves, sharing stories about their home planet and their families. It was the same atmosphere Creel had observed at every meal. No matter what happened, no matter how difficult the day had been, the humans always took the time to sit down together, eat and share. Creel had tried to remain distant, to focus only on the diplomatic mission at hand, but his mind kept drifting back to one thing: connection. For all their advanced technology, for all their intellect, the humans had something the Thalnari had never truly understood: community. The Thalnari had always been individualistic, efficient, and cold in their pursuit of knowledge. But now Creel was starting to question that. Perhaps it wasn't just about knowledge. Maybe, just maybe, it was about something more. As he reached for a piece of bread, Elena turned to him, her eyes filled with a quiet understanding. She had noticed the change in him over the past few days. He no longer looked at the food with disdain. He no longer mocked the simple dishes. Instead, he seemed to be tasting them for something deeper. "You've been quiet today, Ambassador," Elena said softly. "Is everything all right?" Creel paused, his hand still holding the piece of bread. For a moment, he didn't know how to answer. Should he tell her the truth? Should he admit that he was starting to see things differently? "I've been thinking," he said slowly, his voice unsure, "about your way of life, about your food, about what it means." Elena raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Go on." Creel took a deep breath. "Back on Thalnar, we never needed food like this. We have nutrient crystals. Perfect sustenance. We never shared meals like you do." He paused. "I thought it was unnecessary, but now I'm starting to think it's more than just food. It's a way to bring people together." Elena smiled warmly. "You're starting to get it, aren't you?" Creel nodded slowly, though his thoughts were still swirling. "I don't understand it fully yet, but I can see that you humans are stronger because of it. You don't just feed your bodies, you feed your souls." The words were strange to him, unfamiliar, but they felt right. He had witnessed it during the past few days, how humans came together over meals, how they shared stories and laughter, how they made each other feel valued and heard. It wasn't just about survival. It was about living. Elena's smile widened. "It's not just about food, Ambassador. It's about living together. It's about sharing our joys, our struggles, and our triumphs. Food is just the beginning. It's the thread that ties us all together." Creel was quiet for a long moment. He picked up one of the fries from the plate and stared at it, as if it held the answer to all his questions. "Is this what I've been missing?" he wondered. "Is this why humans are so strong?" The next day, Creel attended another meeting with the Human Council. But this time something was different. His thoughts kept returning to the words Elena had shared with him. They had resonated with him deeply. As he sat at the council table, listening to the discussions about resources, trade, and technology, he realized that he was no longer just observing. He was actively participating, sharing his thoughts, his insights, and even his concerns about how the Thalnari could benefit from working more closely with the humans. But it wasn't just about trade deals or resource management. Something else was happening, something subtle yet profound. For the first time in his life, Creel felt as though he was part of something bigger. He wasn't just an outsider looking in. He was becoming a part of this strange emotional world. After the meeting ended, Elena and a few of the officers invited Creel to join them for lunch. He hesitated at first. He had always avoided social gatherings, preferring to focus on the task at hand. But something told him that this time he should go. They sat in a small, casual room surrounded by soft lighting and simple food. The conversation was light, filled with jokes and laughter. Creel had never seen humans so relaxed, so free. As he took a bite of his food, a simple sandwich, he couldn't help but think of how different this was from the sterile, emotionless meals of the Thalnari. "You're quiet again." "Ambassador," one of the officers, Lieutenant Sarah, said with a smile. "You're still thinking about food, aren't you?" Creel raised an eyebrow, surprised. "You noticed?" "Of course we did," Sarah said, laughing. "You've been eating with us more often lately, and every time you seem lost in thought." Creel sighed softly, his mind racing. "I've never understood the way you humans connect over meals. But now, I think I'm starting to see the value in it. It's not just about eating, it's about being together." Elena nodded in agreement. Exactly. We share our food, our stories, and our lives. That's how we build trust, how we build our bonds. And those bonds make us stronger. For the first time, Creel felt a flicker of something inside him that he had never experienced before, a sense of longing. Could the Thalnari ever experience something like this? He wondered. Could they learn to share in the same way? He looked around the room at the smiling faces of the human officers. They were so different from him, so full of warmth and emotion. And yet in some way they were exactly the same. They were living beings searching for connection, for meaning. He had been too blind to see it before. As Creel spent more time with the humans, he found himself more and more drawn to their way of life. It wasn't just the food. It was the way they lived. The way they embraced their emotions, their relationships, their experiences. They had something that the Thalnari had never known, a sense of belonging. One evening, as he walked through the corridors of the horizon, Creel overheard a conversation between two officers. They were discussing their plans for the upcoming holiday, a day of remembrance and unity. Creel had never celebrated anything like that. The Thalnari didn't have holidays or rituals. Everything was about function, efficiency, and progress. But the more he listened, the more intrigued he became. These humans, despite their flaws, despite their imperfections, had something that made them stronger than any advanced technology or perfect system. As Creel sat alone in his quarters that night, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of change within himself. Could I ever convince my people to embrace this? He wondered. Could the Thalnari learn to share, to connect, to feel? He wasn't sure. But one thing was certain. He couldn't turn back now. The food, the laughter, the connections, it had all changed him. And maybe, just maybe, it could change the Thalnari too. Weeks had passed since Creel's first meal with the humans. He had tasted their food, shared their meals, and witnessed the way they connected with each other over something as simple as a plate of fries. And every moment, every bite had led him to one truth. He had changed. The questions that had once seemed trivial, about food, about connection, about emotion, had now become the center of his thoughts. It wasn't just about food anymore. It was about life. It was about living. For the first time in his existence, Creel felt the weight of this realization pressing on him. He had always seen himself as an ambassador of the Thalnari Empire, a representative of a people who believed in logic, efficiency, and individualism. But now, he couldn't ignore the power of what he had witnessed among the humans. Their bonds, their emotions, their simple acts of kindness. They were stronger than anything he had ever known. Creel sat in the observation deck of the UNS Horizon, gazing out at the stars. The ship drifted silently through the galaxy, its soft hum the only sound in the stillness. He had come here often in the past few days, hoping for clarity. But the more he thought, the more uncertain he became. He had always believed in the supremacy of his own species, in their cold efficiency, and their ability to live without the distractions of emotion. But now he wasn't so sure. He had seen the way the humans lived. They embraced each other's differences. They shared their joys and sorrows, and they found strength in their connections. They didn't need to be perfect. They didn't need to be efficient. They only needed each other, and somehow that made them stronger. Creel's mind turned back to the Thalnari Empire. He had always seen them as the pinnacle of civilization, advanced, intelligent, and self-sufficient. They had conquered space, perfected their technology, and lived in harmony with their environment. They had no need for human-like bonds, for emotions, or for shared meals. But as Creel thought about it more and more, he realized that something was missing, something vital. Could the Thalnari ever learn to live like the humans? Could they embrace the idea of connection, of sharing, of living not just for survival but for something more? He didn't know the answer, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't go back to the way things were. As Creel sat lost in thought, Elena entered the observation deck, her footsteps light and quiet. She had come to check on him, as she often did. She knew he had been struggling with something, but she didn't know what. She had seen the change in him, the quiet moments when he looked at the humans with new understanding. "Elena," Creel said softly, not turning to face her. His voice was filled with uncertainty. "I don't know what to do anymore." She sat beside him, her eyes kind. "What's troubling you, Ambassador?" Creel finally turned to look at her, his golden eyes filled with a mix of confusion and determination. "I've seen something in the humans. Something I've never seen in the Thalnari, something that's powerful. Elena waited patiently, allowing him to find the words. They connect, Creel continued. They share their lives, their food, their emotions. And I don't know if I can ignore that anymore. I don't know if I can go back to the way things were, to the way we lived on Thalnar. Elena nodded, understanding. You've been thinking about the humans' way of life, haven't you? Creel's eyes lowered. Yes, it's hard for me to admit, but it's true. I've always believed that the Thalnari were the pinnacle of civilization, that we didn't need these distractions. But now I'm beginning to think we were wrong. Elena smiled gently. I don't think it's about being wrong, Ambassador. It's about learning something new. It's about seeing value in things that you didn't see before. Creel nodded slowly, as if the weight of her words was slowly sinking in. But can the Thalnari change? Can we really learn to live like humans? Can we learn to share, to connect, to embrace what you have? Elena placed a hand on his shoulder, offering reassurance. Change takes time, but it's possible. The first step is admitting that there's something worth changing for. Creel thought about that for a long moment. His mind flashed back to the dinners he had shared with the humans. The laughter, the stories, the sense of community. He thought of the moments when they had all sat together breaking bread, and how it had felt like something more than just eating. It had felt like living. You're right, he said quietly. I've seen that there's value in what the humans do. I've seen the strength that comes from their bonds. But I don't know if the Thalnari are ready for that. We've lived for so long without these things. The hardest part is accepting that you need something you've never had. Elena said softly. But the fact that you're asking these questions, that you're open to change, that's the first step. The rest will come in time. Creel nodded, but doubt still lingered in his mind. Could the Thalnari ever truly change? The thought seemed impossible, yet the more he thought about it, the more it felt like the only way forward. That night, as Creel lay in his quarters, he couldn't sleep. His thoughts were restless, swirling around the same question. What comes next? He thought of the Thalnari, their proud history, their cold, logical way of life. For centuries, they had lived without the emotional bonds that humans took for granted. But now, after everything he had seen, everything he had experienced, he wondered if that way of life was enough. Creel's mind turned to his people's leadership, the council back on Thalnar. If he were to return, would they listen to him? Could he convince them to change? Could he make them see the value of connection, of shared experiences, of emotions? He sat up in his bed, his eyes staring out at the stars. His two hearts beat steadily in his chest, but his mind was in turmoil. He thought of the humans again, of their kindness, their laughter, their willingness to share their food, their lives, their hearts. They had found something the Thalnari had never known, and Creel knew deep down that it was powerful. Creel stood up and walked to the small window in his quarters. He looked out at the vastness of space. The stars seemed so distant, so cold, but as he gazed at them, he realized something. The stars, like the humans, were not cold. They were alive. They burned with energy, with light, with warmth. And the humans, despite their flaws, had found a way to tap into that warmth. And so had he. The following day, Creel met with the Human Council again. This time, there was no distance between them. He spoke with passion, with conviction. For the first time, he spoke not just as an ambassador, but as someone who had seen something that could change everything. Humans, Creel began, his voice strong. I have spent many weeks observing you, learning from you. I have seen the way you live, how you connect, how you share, how you feel. I have come to realize that this is something powerful. This is something that the Thalnari need. We have lived too long without these connections, without understanding the value of shared experience, but now I believe it is time for change. I believe it is time for the Thalnari to learn from you. There was a moment of silence. The humans in the room exchanged looks, surprised by his words. But Creel didn't falter. He knew that the path forward was uncertain, but he also knew that it was the only way. Elena was the first to speak. Ambassador, this is a big step, but we believe in you. We believe that the Thalnari can learn to embrace what we have. It will take time, but we are here to help. Creel nodded, his golden eyes steady. Thank you, Elena. I don't know what the future holds, but I know this. We must move forward, together. As Creel walked out of the meeting, he felt lighter than he had in weeks. The path ahead was unclear, filled with challenges and uncertainty. But for the first time in his life, he was ready to face it. He was ready to learn, to grow, and to change. And for the first time, he understood what the humans had known all along. It's not about perfection. It's about connection.